Hello and welcome to Creative Warrior, where we fight for our creativity. This is a creativity chat where we talk to creators out there fighting for their creativity. Today's guest is Marissa. Marissa is a Lansing-based illustrator with an affinity for a bittersweet narrative. After leaving her career as an art teacher, she's written and illustrated children's books, developed a series to show around the art festival circuit, and even dabbled in surface design and wallpaper patterning. Her sunny studio is above a plant shop, which is conveniently across from a bakery. Very important. Welcome, Marissa. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, I'm so excited because you are one of our first outside of the writing scope creators. So welcome. Thanks
Mhm.
for sharing that part of the creative journey. So to start, just kind of give us an idea of your origin story, how you got into your artistic talents, and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of a meandering road.
Usually.
But I'll keep it condensed. Basically, yeah, I didn't have a lot of art like in high school. And so I learned to draw. I say that I learned to draw because I started from the base up and learned classically at community college in Grand Rapids. Some of the most fantastic teachers I've ever had. And then I transferred to Kendall College of Art and Design and went into their illustration program. And what I didn't know then, until like I got there, was that all of the kids that were in the illustration cohort with me were the kids that had been drawing since they could like chew on a crayon, right? And so
Mhm.
then there's me who's like, I'm so new to this. And I was immediately out of my depth, right? And I think it worked in my favor because it kind of fostered this need to prove myself or this competitive nature. And I think I worked like at least twice as long on every major project as all of my classmates did. So I really pushed myself to have a lot of growth in a really short amount of time. And then halfway through that program, I decided to switch to education. So when I finished up, I kind of had this dual training in education and illustration. I moved to Lansing and taught for the next 10 years. And now, geez, it's about 5 years ago now, I left education to just pursue the illustration side of things full time. And that's what I'm doing now.
Awesome. What made you, before we dive into new stuff, what made you even want to start studying art in the first place if you weren't one of those kids that drew all the time or had artwork, in your book?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I liked to draw. And it started out as like one of those, oh, this could be a fun class,
Mhm.
like I took yoga in college too, and I was like, oh, this will be just like a really fun class. I don't know what I want to do yet, so I'm just going to try a lot of different things. And it really, like, it felt right, like it stuck. And I think what encouraged me so much and something that I still like grab onto and something that I like taught throughout my teaching career and live by is that it's not something that you are innately born with. Like, you're not born creative or not creative, and you're not born like good at drawing or not good at drawing, because otherwise I wouldn't be drawing, right? So it's just this idea that it doesn't matter where you start or like when you start. You could be 18 years old or you could be 5 years old, right? But it's just the practice that you put into it, and you can develop it if you can work hard. And I feel like out of, out of all the things that you question, especially like in the creative genre, you just question everything that you're producing. But the one thing that I know is like, I can work hard. I might struggle at this and that, but the one thing I do know is that I can put my head down and grind, right? So if that's what it takes, then it's like, okay, I can do this.
That's awesome. That's an interesting perspective too, because so many artists, writers, creators are kind of do feel like they're kind of born with that, or at least born with that
Mhm.
passion for it. You're not innately born with or without the talent, but at least maybe the passion for it. So it's interesting to hear kind of the perspective, like you know, you aren't necessarily born with it. You can develop it later in life. And if you're not born with it, don't let it stop you from pursuing it. Cause I think too many people feel like, well, I'm in my 20s now, 30s now. It's too late for me. I should have been born with this or whatever.
Right, exactly, exactly. Like I think about, um, things like playing the piano and everything. I know that I could sit down and learn because I always like I see the dueling pianists in the bar. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that would be my absolute dream job, just to go and like,
Being pianist in a bar.
oh man, if I could just start all the way over, that's what I would do forever. But I mean, that's the kind of mindset I'm like, oh, it would take me a long time to get to that point to be able to like play 1,000 songs in front of people and sing while I'm doing it. Like, I know that I could, but I think about that and I wonder if that's kind of what people who have this like love of the creative, but it feels so overwhelming. It kind of makes me have that perspective like I bet that's how they feel when you hear like, oh, I can't draw a straight line, I can only draw stick people. It'd be like me being like I can play chopsticks.
But everybody at one point could only play chopsticks, even
Right.
the dueling pianists. Um, so tell us a little bit about what you're working on right now, because you do a lot. You have
Yeah.
kind of, I feel like, developed a lot of creative pursuits. So maybe talk a little bit about how you kind of got into your different avenues and kind of what you're working on now and what you've got going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
For people that might not know what you do and what you got.
It's really all over the place. I did try and like do some pruning. Every now and then I'm trying to learn the art of pruning. Like just because I want to or just because I can doesn't mean I have to follow a pursuit, right? Which is hard because there's so much fun to be had. But I guess when I first left teaching, I got right busy and I ended up writing and illustrating a children's book. And it was inspired by my students. So it was so fresh in my mind when I was leaving. Actually, yeah, I have a copy right here. So it's just this little book. It's called Get That Grit. And it's basically like this idea of growth mindset, right? Like my students knew about growth mindset. They know that they could grow their brain. But then I was seeing like this disconnect between, okay, we get what growth mindset is, but I'm still freaking out the second I mess up on a project. Like they didn't have the connection between I can grow my brain and get better at things and here's how I try again and persevere. So I just did this little book and it's basically like a little how to like a call and response thing to be able to take perseverance and make it applicable for little things like I can't tie my shoe to like big things like telling the truth when it's hard, right? So it's like this one exercise that kind of spans for kids through adults, that kind of thing. So that loops into what I'm doing now because now I go into schools and do like author visits where I give like a presentation on the book. And it's like this perfect marriage from what I loved so much about like my life in education and what I'm doing now. And I have this opportunity to like go in and have a little bit of management and like a cafeteria full of kids and just like share something I really believe in and love. So that's probably one of the bigger focuses. I also started some mural stuff like a couple years ago. I fell into muraling. I did one and somebody saw it and was like, can you do another one? And then somebody saw that one and it kind of spiraled. So I think I'm up to like 9 murals so far, and I've got like 4 or 5 more kind of waiting in the wings, which is a really exciting thing.
Oh.
It's fun to do something on like such a grand scale when I usually work so small. I also have like a little origami inspired drawing series that I take and I do. That's like what I was working on today, where I have like little they're like
Oh,
little origami animals or buildings or what have you, and they're just drawing and painted, and then I put them in frames, and that's what I take around to like the different festivals and everything. So this being the end of summer, festival season is like big time, like in the midst of it. And so in September and October, I've got a few more shows before the season ends.
oh my gosh, that is a lot. Um, so talk a little bit about, I guess, process and how you and whether like it varies, like your creative process
Mhm.
varies based on, whether you're working on a book or writing a book or, or starting a new art series or a mural. Like, how does that creative process work? Like, where do you get inspiration? What do you do when you're like, okay, now it's time to sit down and start? Huh. How does all of that, especially with so many different things?
Yeah, yeah. And what's really interesting is that I didn't see it at first, but I noticed it, like somebody pointed it out to me, and they're like, you have a, because I am all over the place and I am trained as an illustrator. So my style can really vary because a lot of the training that I have is like working with a client and kind of mirroring what they want in a style. So I didn't see it at first, but like looking holistically at things, there is kind of an aesthetic that creeps through everything, whether it be, a mural or a small like drawing or a children's book. That's a completely different, look to it or the way it's stylized. So I have kind of an aesthetic, but I don't think that's where I start. You mentioned like a narrative in my intro, and I think that's probably how my brain works. That's probably where things spark. Um, is with a good story,
Mhm.
and even in like the one lines that I write on my drawings, it has to be something that pulls you in, and like you want the bigger picture, it makes you think of something else, or it reminds you of a different time or something like that, where it just like it creates a bigger um story surrounding that narrative. um yeah, I think, I don't know, I have you ever read the book The Artist's Way?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Actually,
Yeah,
I led a course.
I don't know a single person who's read The Artist's Way that like doesn't roll their eyes when they say, "Yeah, I read it," because that is a tough, uh, obnoxious book. It's a lot of work. It's really good, and to be totally honest, I don't think I've gotten all the way through it. But the idea of being able just to walk around in your everyday life and totally glean inspiration, and just knowing that you're drawing it in like a sponge, whether or not you use it or whether or not you notice it, you're always, taking in little bits from all over, like a flower that you hadn't seen before. Like I was like going on a walk and it was like this weird yellow orchid. And I'm like, I've never seen something like that in the wild in Michigan. I'm curious what that is, and so am I using that in my art right now? No. But is it stuck in my brain? Yeah. So maybe that works its way out as like a story in a future children's book about a kid who's like exploring plants, and maybe it's an educational piece or something, or maybe the line drawing of it you know, flowers. Maybe it's getting my brain to like start thinking in the floral range, you know, and that comes out in like a wallpaper design. So I don't know. I don't know if I take things for granted um when I'm looking around, but I don't know if I always 100% know where the inspiration comes from either. That's a long answer, but
No, no, it's funny that you mentioned the artist way, because the creative warrior stuff that I do kind of is a almost a response to the artist way.
yes.
Because I agree with you. It's great if you have the time and you have the flexibility in your life to really implement all the things.
Yes.
Which a
Who's
lot
got
of people these days don't, right? She's, and from an older generation, kind of from a different period. So I kind of describe the creative warrior path as kind of, without calling her out, but it's kind of like the artist way for like the modern creative to like
I love that. Mhm.
work in some of these things in your everyday life. Which leads me into a question for you. How do you find time for, like, how do you segment your time? How do you balance, say balance like it's, a thing that
Yeah.
people actually achieve, but how do you attempt to balance, life, friends, especially because it sounds like this is, your art is your job, which is amazing. And how do you balance kind of the art side of it with the business side of it and the life side of it and all of that? It's a pretty big question, but
Yeah, no, it's a really good question because it's like, you know, when you start something and you don't know enough to even know what questions to ask, that's kind of where I started when I left education and then I jumped into this and I had my space. I had like all the time now because I didn't have my, you know, my teaching job, which was all encompassing. So my response to that and the stress of like, now I don't have a paycheck coming was just to work all the time, nonstop, you know, not take care of myself very well. And then like, you know, stop to sleep and then get back up. And it was just frantic. It was just like, get as much done, no direction, just go, go, go. And that will, you know, that'll make up for, or that'll make me feel better about taking this leap. So I think the first lesson was like, okay, frantic doesn't mean productive. Like there is a big difference. So you have to be intentional. You know, I'm going to do this, 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 and this today. And if I can get through that, then I will move on. Here's what I'm going to do tomorrow. So I have, here's my trusty planner. It's from the shop downstairs, but basically it's like the it's a weekly planner, right? So I'll be able to I don't know if I have any good examples. They all just look like this. They're just chicken scratch. But it's just a place where I can come in, sit down, and make my list. Because otherwise my brain can't focus. And I know I've got 20 things to do. And it can be as easy as write so and so back, you know, so that I can cross things off the list, you know. The act of crossing, like, look, I did a thing. But yeah, I think knowing when to pause things. And this is curious to me, like for you as a writer, you know, when I'm working on my children's books and everything, like I've got a few that are in process and I can dig in and work really hard for a few months. And then I have to almost just like cut and run. I have to like put it away and I have to step away from it. When I feel like, okay, it's good, it's done, then I'm like, okay, I need some space from this because I need to be able to detach emotionally a little bit to see where it can improve, you know?
Mhm.
So that was another lesson, just like you can't force it.
Yeah.
I spend hours and hours, but if it's not actually doing any good, if I'm just patting myself on the back with how great something is for hours, like there's little chance that I'll be able to find improvement in that headspace. So I don't know, just kind of like being a lot more honest with what I can and cannot do. Um, being honest and like treating myself more like an employee, oh, I need a break to walk around outside for 10 minutes and, you know, drink a glass of water, before when I was in my frantic stage, it was like, do not pick your head up. You have so many hours in the day. You have to keep working. And now it's like, I'm going to take a lunch break. I'm going to go read outside in the grass for a half an hour. And that's okay. That is helpful. So just like treating myself with respect, not being frantic, and just being really honest with like what's going to bring me closer to my goals. What do I ultimately want, and what probably is something that I want but won't actually serve me. I have a lot of people that like and know, like, I'm gonna say this because we're among friends, right? But no shade on the people that are just getting art shows started up, because that's how they have to start, like new art shows and stuff. What I have found is that is often not my market. And
Mm,
so whereas I want to like go to these new shows and be one of these people that helps get them going, I know that my market isn't there, and my energy is better suited for an art festival that is established,
mm,
maybe a little bit trickier to get into, maybe the booth fee is harder, but um, the effort that I put into those gives me a bigger reward. So like my heart is kind of like with these startups, but I know now that their success is not on me. So I
mm.
want to be there and help them, but when I'm honest with myself, my energy is better suited reaching out to my own market, you know? So yeah,
Yeah,
thanks.
a really important lesson that a lot of creators don't often learn,
Mm,
or learn when it's too late, or they're frustrated or burnt out. Just saying
mm,
no to things, or knowing where, if you're treating, your art like a business, knowing where you're gonna end up being the most profitable, or knowing where
mhm,
your market is, and knowing you can't maybe you do help out one of those events once a year or something,
mhm.
because like you mentioned, your heart does go out to them, and you want to help people, but
Right.
you also have to guard your time and your energy. And I had to realize that for a little while. Comic Cons. Like, I love Comic Cons. I love going to Comic Cons, and I have had good luck at some, but until I had another novel or something else to have, they weren't the
Mm.
best market for me. And now that I'm going to have another novel that, that audience might like, I can start looking back into going again. But I had to stop myself from trying to sign up for every Comic Con that
Yeah.
that came
Yeah.
across, my plate.
It's tough though. It's tough being honest with yourself,
Mhm.
and like finding the truth between like what do I like and what is good for me. Like that's kind of with teaching. That was like a newer lesson, is that like I did a lot of like teaching outside of my teaching job after I left, because I was like, I have this skill set, you know, like teaching is something that I know that I am good at. And so I can teach, I can do private lessons, I can do tutoring, I can do little one-off classes, I can do classes at Reach, the art center over in Rio Town. I love Reach so much, but it like got to the point where I just dreaded it and I hated it because I wasn't healed from my experience of teaching. And so it was like forcing this thing on myself because I should. And it did make some money and it was something that I was good at, but it got to the point where I'm like, you know what? You hate this. This is not where you're supposed to be right now. So the lesson is like, just because you are good at something doesn't mean you have to do it. And that's like really tough because who wants to like, I don't know, who wants to leave something you know you're good at to be vulnerable and try something that you might suck at or that might fail? Like, I might hate doing it, but I know it's not going to fail, you know? So it's like, it's like a tough truth.
Mhm.
And also just giving myself grace and like, maybe at some point I'll go back and
Mhm.
I'll teach. And it's probably, you know, it's not something that you lose. And deep down, I love teaching. You know, it's just like right now, it's
Mhm.
okay to also own that that's not where I am right now. And I don't need to be teaching right now if it's causing me that much frustration.
Mm, yeah, yeah, that's an important and to me an important form of discipline, which I think a lot of creators kind of hear discipline or hard work or grit or any of that. Not that writers and creators aren't hard workers, but I think they in terms of the grind, they hear that and are very much like, no, I'm a creator. I want to create what comes to me and I want to create for the art of it. And they hear the word discipline and kind of push back a little bit. But it sounds like, well, one, the most successful creators obviously have to have a lot of discipline, but you seem like you have a good kind of handle on that, on the discipline side of it. So how do you kind of balance that line between creativity and discipline? Like if you're not feeling it that day, if you're not feeling the creative juices, do you still sit down at your desk or kind of how do you handle that?
Great question, because that is definitely something that like that I've um yeah, that I've had to learn. No, that I am still learning. Let's be fair. I feel like it was Chuck Close, the painter. He said, "Oh shoot, what did I'm gonna botch the quote, but it's one of my favorite quotes." He says like new creators or new artists or rookie or whatever artists think, you know, or wait for inspiration. The rest of us just get to work. And I'm like, oh, I love that. That's so me. But
Oh,
it was
sorry to interrupt. You have it
yeah,
on your website. And I was like, that name sounds really familiar. So it says
yeah.
inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us show up and get.
Thank you. Yes, yes. Inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us get to work. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I should know it if I
That's on your website, but, which I had up. So
so I think like there there is this moment a couple years into my second career, right, as an artist, and I realized like, oh man, this is I'm not creating for fun anymore, and it was starting to become a grind, right? It was starting to become very unfun. It was like in college, I took a job at my favorite bookstore, and then I hated my favorite bookstore. I was like, what did I do? What was I thinking? So it's kind of like that. And so I I don't know. My response to it was like, okay, I need something that doesn't matter at all and that doesn't, I'm not relying on it to make money and nobody cares about it and I don't care about it. So I started like a little YouTube video, like a episode recap thing. And I have so much fun with it. And it's like a little creative, a little goofy, but completely non consequential, you know? like, it doesn't matter if I miss a week because I don't care. Nobody cares, you know? And it doesn't matter if it's bad or good because I'm just having fun with it, you know? And I don't know. It is another thing on the plate. You know, it is another thing. But for me, at this point, it works because it's something that I can look forward to. And if that requires me to kind of zone out while I'm doing stuff, like if I hit a patch where I'm like, wow, this really sucks, this is not fun anymore. It just like, it gives me a little bit of a creative outlet that once again, my like my income isn't dependent on it being good.
Mhm.
So that was how I like solved that problem for me. But then I think also like, I don't know, do you feel this as a writer, like when you get into a little bit of a rut, if you almost not even necessarily start something new, like I don't need to start a new mini series, but I can just flirt with the idea and do some sketches about like what could a new project be? You know, like I what about a story about a little kid who's planting a garden, you know? And what would those, you know, illustrations look like and what color palette would I use? And if you need to sacrifice like a couple of hours just playing around with something to give yourself a break, I think that's a fair trade-off.
I will say that's probably the advice I would give someone. Whether
Hmm.
I follow it or not is a very different.
Well, what do you do? What do you do? Because I know you hit that.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think it's gotten a little different. I think I'm actually getting into a chapter of life where I'm going to need to rethink some of that because now I have like my novel coming out and
Mhm.
I have to start thinking, if I do want to start thinking of it like a business, I have to start thinking, like, I don't even have the novel published yet, but I have to be thinking what's next. Like, if people like,
Yeah.
there has to be something ready or at least on the horizon that they're going to get. So I have to be thinking what's next. I have to be thinking in terms of audience and trends and, you know, what people are
Mhm.
actually going to read versus what I want to write. So I am actually, when you were talking about it, I'm super envious of your show, your YouTube recap
Then
show.
I know you've never watched it because
I
it's
have watched a couple episodes. And I love it. And I love because I'm so envious of just that, like that ability to just do something that you know doesn't nothing for you besides give
yeah.
you joy. Like absolutely nothing. I've gotten to the bad habit of trying to figure out how I can monetize all my passions, like even yoga. Like I love introducing yoga to people through Creative Warrior and things like that. But as soon as I discovered how much I loved it, I was like, okay, now what can I do with this? What can I, instead of just enjoying it?
Yeah.
And I think that's a lesson I'm starting to butt up against that I don't quite have a solution for yet. I just, even just talking it out now, I'm like, I don't think I'll listen to things. I think that's my escape, reading and
Mhm.
listening to podcasts or listening to books that don't have anything to do with like my genre, or reading it to find out what other people are doing in my, in my scope, just stuff I want to read.
Mhm.
Think that's probably a good escape from me. Stuff that I know inspires me, rereading the same book that I know I love,
Yeah,
just because I love it.
that's so nostalgic. That's so like eating your favorite food, you know, the comfort of reading the words that you know and like looking forward to pieces of the story that you know are coming.
Um, but yeah, so I am super envious of that. And I think that's something I need to kind of focus, work on, work
Well,
on finding something that's not work.
but it's also hard when you depend on your craft to pay your bills. You
Mm,
know, like if I'm honest with myself, there are times when I'm like, I don't need to be spending, even if it's only like 3 hours a week, I don't need to be spending it on making a video. I could be spending it on, there's always stuff to do. So it's like, it's tough to talk yourself out of being more productive when you've got like this weight of like, life and bills and everything that's just like looming over you, like success. It's just it gets so difficult.
That's one of the reasons I do have a full-time job, and it's been a blessing and a curse, right? Like I curse
Mhm.
it every day, like, "Ugh, I want to have time to write and work," but I actually had a job like freelancing for a while. I was writing, and I thought like that was the dream. I'm like, I'm doing what I love for, my job, but I got so burnt out on writing all day for everyone else that by the end of the day I didn't have
Oh,
any
wow.
energy for myself. So now I'm in a job that like is completely unrelated. I'm technically in IT. I'm completely unrelated to my writing. And yes, it's
Yeah.
hard finding time and doing all of that, but at least by the end of the day, I'm like, I really want to work on my stuff now because I've been waiting like all day.
Mhm.
So yeah, the the disconnect, and that luckily I don't have that yet. I mean, that's the dependency on the art. Um,
Mhm.
but that's the goal. So that's why I,
Isn't
you
it
know,
funny how things like work on paper and how different they are in real life? Because you're like you said, like this is the dream. Like I wanted to work in my favorite like book and coffee shop. You're like, this would be perfect for me. And then you get there and you're like, oh man, something is wrong here.
I've done that one too. So yes, I I feel that one. So we talked about a little bit about the process of like discipline versus creativity. Do you have, and you mentioned your show, do you have any tools like specifically that when you're sitting down and you feel blocked, I would say writer's block, so your form of writer's block,
Yeah.
but you're sitting down, it's your normal work day, you're like, it's not time to make a YouTube video yet. So you're sitting down, you're trying to work on a project and it's just not coming. Do you have any tools that you kind of depend on like in that moment to get the energy back?
A really good question. Hmm. I don't know. I mean, I have when I'm really stuck, when I've got like just the baby idea and that's it. And I'm like, okay, where do I go from here? I have like a whole bunch of notebooks, and a lot of times it'll be almost stream of consciousness. Um, it's so messy. It's like doodles and words, and um, I wouldn't even necessarily call it like an exercise, but it's just trying to like a brainstorm. Anything that comes to mind, any image, any like keywords, writing some things down, crossing them out, arrows everywhere, circling this, and just like it is a lot of writing, just because I'm not going to sit down and like sketch things out before it's like a full flushed idea. So I just like um yeah, I'll just like write out the keywords that I'm looking for and then go back and like pick through them. I think like honestly, I think it it really um a lot of times is just locked in there. It's not like I'm necessarily learning something new to be able to then produce something. It's like it's somewhere in here and I kind of know where I want to go, but it's too muddled, right? So as soon as I start like blah, putting things down on the paper, then you can kind of pick through and circle like specific words or the direction that you're heading to get a little bit of clarity. I think that's pretty much the
Mm.
process that I use. It also helps if I am under a deadline. I'm like, okay, I have to do this. I gotta figure this out, make it happen. Like, we don't have the luxury of, just like, oh, it'll come to me. When there is a time crunch, then that often produces results.
Well, I never get anything done if there's not some sort of deadline associated with it. It's why I love like online contests or like events in town here, like writing events or even scheduling my own stuff. Like if there's not a time stamp or a deadline, I have to just pick a publish date for my book, because if I don't, I'll just never publish it. Like, yeah. And I think that's one thing you have to do as a indie or independent, artist.
Yeah.
Those deadlines.
Do you think that's like a creative person thing, like across the board, the different creative people you've spoken to? Do you think a lot of us work in that same way?
I think so, but I also think it's just a human thing too. I mean, what is it? Is it Parkinson's law that it will fill, oh my gosh, something will fill the time that it's given.
Oh, wow.
I'm totally butchering this quote right now. It's not Parkinson's law. Scratch. I just tried to do a quick Google and it's not what. Oh, here. The old adage that work expands to fill the time allotted for its completion.
Excellent.
So just work in general expands the time allotted for it. So I think maybe that applies to creatives a little bit more, because we constantly like want to be making our things perfect and we feel so emotionally attached to them that we will work on them forever because they're never going to be good enough. So if there's no time allotted, we'll just keep working on it. But I do think it's also just a human thing.
Yeah.
So they had to give it a name. But yeah, so what do you have right now coming out that people should watch for, or that you're excited about in progress? What are you working on?
Well, I've got a couple of murals coming up. I actually don't know if I'm allowed to say anything about them. I don't want to jinx anything either. So, around the greater Lansing area. So a couple more murals, and then let's see. I'm hoping to get a good jump this upcoming school year on a lot of school visits and like author visits, and talks about perseverance and grit and everything with kids. But otherwise, just finishing strong. And oh my gosh, the festival season is so hard. It's so much work. It's where the money is. I get it. And ultimately it is very fun, but by the end of something, an extended amount of time, you're like, all right, we need a break. So 4 more shows, and then we're taking a little break from that too.
And people can get your stuff. They can get prints, they can get your artwork, they can get wallpaper.
Yeah. I've got everything on my website. It's TawnyThaler.com. And I've got my books, I've got my portfolio, my pretty big series of illustrations, and then a link to like the wallpaper I do through Society 6. So there's links to those different things too. But yeah, also I live on Instagram, so it's a good place to check into what I'm doing every day.
All right, we'll put the link and your Instagram below so people can find you and connect with you. Before we wrap up, what is, and I'll give kind of a choice here because you've given lots of great advice. So what advice is the number one piece of advice you would give to someone trying to do what you're doing, make their art their full-time gig, or can answer either what is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
That's a great question. I would say, you know, I think it's so cliche. It's so cliche, but I literally think this every time because every project that I'm in the middle of, and it does not matter if it's, big, little, mural, book, whatever, I always hit that moment where I'm like, this is trash. What is wrong with me? Why did I think I can do this? I legitimately always hit that moment. So the whole adage of trust the process, like when I feel that, I'm like, you're fine, trust the process. Because it you hit that wall and then you have to have faith that like you'll come out of it on the other side, and you can't look at a project halfway done and assess yourself as a person based on that. You have to trust the process. And it's so cheesy. It's like live, laugh, love, but like really, like not just trust the process, but like have faith in yourself that that you can follow through and trust the process. Was it not this summer, but last summer, I was doing a mural at the same time of two other muralists under this bridge, right?
Mm.
And we, you work a bit and then you step back and you look at it, and you work a bit and you step back and you look at it. And there was a moment where all three of us were stepped back and looking, and we kind of like leveled with each other. And we were literally, I was like, mine looks so bad right now. And I'm looking at yours and going, wow, they know what they're doing. It's looking so good. And they were both like, we're literally doing the same thing. Like all three of us were annihilating our own pieces in our brain and like, wow, they're so much better than me. So it's like, it's the same. It was the same for all three of us. It's the same for myself, no matter what project that I'm working on. And you know what? The mural turned out fine. So yeah, just put your head down, trust the process, trust yourself, keep going.
I love it. And that is a wonderful place to end our chat. Thank you so much for joining us today. We will put all your socials and everything or information below so people can find you. I appreciate you being here.
No, this is great. Thank you so much for having me. I could talk all day about this.
Awesome. I hope everybody watching got lots of inspiration that can help you go fight for your creativity.